Hi, this is Ashley the Beer Wench, and I'm super excited. I actually had to study up a little bit before this for my Orval vertical tasting tonight. We have a 5-month from April of 2009, so it's very recent. We have a January 2007, which means it's 1 year, 9 months. And then this one's October of 2002. This is a 7-year-old beer. It's kind of ridiculous. I'm really, really excited. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and open these beers. We have to be very, very careful as we open them because the yeast is at the bottom, very subtle, so I'm going to do a very slow pour. The first one is the 5-month. Alright, here's our 1 year, 9-month Orval. The unique thing about Orval for a Trappist brewery is it doesn't have any specific style. It is its own style. Orval is Orval. It's not a Trappist triple, it's not a Trappist double or anything like that. So it's very infamous for being its own style. Another interesting fact about Orval is right before it goes into the bottle, it's inoculated or spiked with Brettanomyces, which is a wild yeast. They actually do it in a different facility from the brewery, still on the monastery grounds. And because they inoculate it right as they put it into the beer actually gets bottle conditioned further with Brett. The characteristics of Brett don't show until about 9 months after they bottle the beer, which will be very interesting with this tasting as we have a 5-month, which the Brett hasn't been fully developed, and then we have a year and 9 months and a 7-year, and so I'm really looking forward to this. We're going to do stuff. Alright, so this is really, really cool. I'm super excited because 1, I love Orval, 2, I love Brett, and 3, I love Trappist beers. So we're talking about Orval today. I have a vertical tasting, a 5-month, a 1 year, 9 month, and a 7-year. Totally different stages of what this beer is doing because it's all bottle conditioned. If you don't know anything about Orval, they are a Trappist brewery out of Belgium, one of 6, and you know there's all these different steps that you have to take to become a Trappist brewery. Something really interesting about Orval is that it has its own style, it's re-fermented, bottle conditioned, but right before they put it in the bottle they inoculate it with Brett, and that's wild yeast, which happens to yield some really interesting flavors and eventually turns into a sour ale. It takes about 9 months before Brett interacts with the beer, or the Brett really comes out of it. So tasting the 5-month pretty much, it tastes very similar to an India Pale Ale, a traditional style from England, where the malt and the cane sugar content is a little more apparent as opposed to, you know, the sour yeast and the hops. The hops are still fresh though in this, so there's a bit of bitterness. But then when we get to the 1 year, 9 months, the hops tend to have died out a little bit because after time the hops drop out. They're not really fresh leaves anymore. The hops is a plant, and you know the potency has gone down, which allows all the other flavors to explode a little more. When I smelt this, it was just pure wild yeast, a little bit of sourness, a little bit of that vinegar that you expect when you're drinking a sour beer. When I taste it though, it's a lot cleaner than I expected. The malt is still present, yet the sugar that I tasted here seemed to have mellowed out as well as the hops. So it's not as sweet, seems very well balanced, and then you get that little tinge in the back of your tongue of that sour flavor. Overall, actually well balanced, because if you've ever tasted a sour, you know you're tasting a sour. This, you wouldn't necessarily call a sour beer. You might say, you know, like you have all these characteristics, you still get a little bitterness, you know, you still have some sweetness from the malt and from the sugar, but then you have sour. Alright, so here's the deal. We tasted a 5-month Orval, a 1 year, 9 month Orval, and now we're moving on to La Creme de la Creme, the 7-year. It's going to be really unique because I've never tasted a beer this old before, and to be able to taste something that was from this year and then a couple years later and then this one, it's pretty phenomenal. So right away the aroma is pure sour, very reminiscent of Flanders. It reminds me actually a little bit in color, a lot of it in aroma of the Flanders red style. Surprisingly, it doesn't taste as sour as I expected. The sourness is still there. Compared to the two other previous ones, it's a little more complex. This one has the strongest sour component, the strongest sour aroma with all these funky things going on in it. So here's what I'm going to do at the very, very end. Unfortunately, I haven't drank through the last two a lot. This one's down at the very, very bottom. I've left the yeast at the bottom of all three of these bottles. Reintegrating the yeast back into the beer is going to take the flavor down completely a notch. And so I'm going to see if adding the yeast to all three will take them out to maybe an equal level. So this one is the first. It's 5 month. The 1 year, 9 month. And this one is the 7 year. So we are going to taste, yeah, I got all the yeast. We're going to taste what yeast does to the flavor of beer. Definitely adds a very, very cloudy component. Right? So originally I thought that this was hoppy, had a little bit of cane sugar. Right now, could be the warmer temperature. Alright, let's go back to this. Now with the yeast added to it, it's interesting. That sourness, that appeal that it had before is completely gone. And it's coating my tongue. Alright, now let's try this one. This is the 7 year with the yeast added. It's bitter. My tongue is numb. Not numb, but like dried out. That became dry, that became dry, and that became dry. I just epiphanized that pouring yeast into an Orval pretty much makes every Orval taste the same, and it makes me want to just lick this fabric right here because my tongue is so dry right now and my palate is almost killed, and the flavor that I was tasting before is no longer there. This one doesn't have that hoppy sugar aroma, doesn't have that hoppy sugar flavor. This one doesn't have that like sourness and sugar component. This one doesn't have the sour. Now they all taste the same because the yeast is back in it, and I'd rather just lick a piece of leather or a piece of fabric. The lesson I've learned about drinking an Orval flight, a vertical flight, is that you want to retain the yeast at the bottom for a little bit, but you need to pour it out very, very carefully, and so that you keep the yeast in the bottle. You can drink the Orval and get its pure flavor, and then add the yeast in later in order to get to the health benefits of the yeast. But I like the flavor of it without the yeast, and that's what I've learned. It's when people ask me what my favorite part of Lord of the Rings is, and I'm like, what are you talking about? What did you like, the first one, the second one, the third one? I'm like, it's one movie. It's one movie. Yes, there were certain parts of the first one that were really compelling, but the second one, you know, totally different. The characters have developed by that point, you know, like everybody is kind of like equal, and then at the end, some of them have died off, you know, and then there's the survivors who are still going strong, and they give you that happy ending where you're like, yay, all the world is good.